So hi, I'm Kim Jaxon, and all I'm going to talk about is Google Docs and the way that I've been using it in a big writing class and actually across the range of freshmen to graduate students. How many of you use Google Docs? Just yourselves, right? And how many of you used it with students in teaching? Okay, cool. So I'm going to show you just a few ways that you might think about using it. And I'm going to give you just the one little basic here that some of you might not know, and that the easiest way for students and you to get to Google is to go to our Chico State homepage, /Google, and it takes you right to their Wildcat Mail. So, right, Chico State has Google Apps for Education. That's one of our platforms. The student email is actually powered by Google. So what I like about this is that students don't need a separate account. They already have Google Docs as part of their package here at Chico State, so they don't need to sign up or set up anything, although I certainly have them sign up for plenty of other stuff, so that's not the reason why, not entirely the reason why I do that. This is what my homepage looks like on my Google Doc. It can actually be a little intimidating. I realize if you aren't using it a lot because it looks like it's overwhelming. I manage all of this with folders for my different classes. There's a variety of reasons that I moved to using Google Docs. Pretty much anything my students do is turned in this way, although I certainly use Tumblr and I use Digo and I use Twitter and lots of platforms. But most of their major assignments, in fact all their major assignments, are turned in through Google Docs. I've had a lot of people say that they're concerned that students don't have access to, for example, the internet. And actually that's becoming less and less true. I just did some professional development actually in Oroville with 4th grade teachers. Students have computers and they have internet. What they don't have is printers and ink. So really the big divide is not so much anymore, especially for us in higher ed, they have access to the internet. There's a gazillion computer labs on this campus, and I'm not doing them a favor by not showing them where they are and how to use them. But where they really struggle, especially for my students who are educational opportunity program students that I work with a lot, are that they don't always have a printer or ink, or a printer or ink that their roommate hasn't used all the ink. So I find this to actually be the great mediator, that they don't have to figure out how to print something out. And one of the first reflections I got from a student said to me, you took away all the excuses I have for turning in a paper, because there's no lost flash drives, there's no crashed hard drives, there's no I didn't have any ink. Either it's on Google Docs or it's not. They either did the assignment or they didn't. And I like that. And I like that I can access it wherever I am too, and no longer am packing around these big, 100 student essays. All the time. I can always get to it. I know that there's a little learning curve in getting used to reading on the screen and commenting on the screen and not being curled up with your stack of essays and your tea and your yoga pants, but I just do that with my laptop instead of with a stack of essays now. I want to show you just a few ways that we use it in the class. So pretty traditional in the sense that a lot of just student gives me a draft and the peer or I, or in a lot of times the peers and I, giving feedback. What it has done for me is made it so I give more comments that are about the content and not so much about editing and grammar, although later I do a lot more of that. It's really easy to insert a comment. It's really easy to highlight maybe some editing error that they're having and highlight it for them so that they go back and look at it. But what I like the best about it is the students and I usually end up having a dialogue over here about their paper. So I give them some comment, they come back in and either tell me why they don't want to change it, or I made that change and it's been resolved and I see that that's been resolved. So I like that there's kind of a dialogical connection between the student and I as I'm giving feedback on their drafts. They tell me they like it because it's a really point-outable place for them in their essays that they can work with. And it's legible. For the first time in the history of my student papers, they can actually read my writing, which is a good thing too. And then they share these with peers. One of the things I brought today that's up here with a bunch of stuff you can take with you is the little walkthrough that I give to students of how to create a Google Doc and how to share with you, so you could take that. And Chris will upload it electronically too, but all the TLP people are really good about that too. They typically share with 2 other peers in the class, and they give peer feedback in Google Docs as well. I do not spend a ton of class time helping them figure out how to use it. If I have a smaller class, I'll go to the computer lab, and if not, they're just really smart. And they figure it out. And they come to my office when they can't. Or sometimes if they're all struggling with something, I'll grab somebody from the front and go, can you show them how to do that? Or on occasion, I will create a little video capture that shows them where to click and how to do it. And once I have that as a few database, I don't have to ever touch that again. I can just upload the YouTube video that I've created that shows them how to do something more sophisticated that I want them to do. So a little build up maybe in the summer and then kind of just takes over. The other way that I've used it is this semester, for example, I have a class that's literacy studies, which is mostly juniors and seniors, and we wanted to create a giant lexicon for ourselves around the terms used in literacy studies. So everybody took a keyword that was arising from our readings, and then they created this keyword assignment, kind of like a wiki. And oh my God, it's awesome. I mean, it's beautiful. They did such a good job. And what ended up happening that I couldn't have predicted is they ended up questioning each other's entries, and then getting into these long debates about whether or not that was the appropriate use of like the term text and what. So all over this place, you'll see like long entries where they are going back and forth and changing their entries based on what they're saying. I didn't require that as part of this assignment. They just got to where they took ownership over this wiki and knew they had to use it later and that it had better be right. So they ended up having these long conversations. So another cool way is as a collaborative document that a lot of students can contribute to create things like class lexicon and glossaries or reader's guides or those kinds of things. And then finally, Chris and I use Google Docs a lot to annotate readings. And so I will often upload a reading that we have for class, in this case Sylvia Scribner's Literacy in 3 Metaphors, and then I will assign groups of them different sections that they have to annotate. And they go in, usually when we're together in class, and annotate the crap out of this thing. Provide links to other research that's mentioned, summarize, ask questions of the text. I go in there and respond to them. And then we assign the annotated version of our article to be reread. And then they read kind of all the supplementary materials that they've created around it. And I'll tell you, this has been really helpful for me to see where they're confused in the reading, to see where they have really awesome ideas that I can draw from in class and use like in their papers. So often this is done, like I said, with us together in a computer lab with the reading uploaded that I've already uploaded, and then they're divided up in groups and go in and start doing some of the annotated work. They've started to do that on their own in teams. So a group of 4 students will say, hey, I'm going to share this with the other 3 people in my group, and they're doing their reading together and annotating the reading together and having a conversation about the reading outside of class. So it's all the collaborative nature of this technology use is what I like, that it actually distributes the thinking, and that they're working together to try to make meaning, and they're trying to solve problems. So those are really, I use it, like a one-to-one thing that's pretty traditional. I use it as a wiki. I use it as a way to collaborate around annotations and reading. And sometimes we do group notes together in class. So we'll have laptops open and someone's the note taker, and we do kind of a crowdsourcing of the notes from class, and then they share those out with everybody in the class. So I use Google Docs a ton, obviously, a ton. And then I just make sure that I'm kind of on top of my home page and that I'm creating these folders and dragging stuff into the folders so that it doesn't all get lost and I have to go find it again. I tend to make naming conventions, so last name, the title of the assignment, and the date, so that I don't get paper 1 100 times. So I have to train them on some of that, that, hey, here's the convention for really anybody, but for our class that I want you to follow. All those tricks that you learn over time so you don't get 98 assignment 1s kind of thing that come through. I can still see who it's from over here, but it just certainly helps me when I'm searching for it. I think that's all I want to say about that, because Chris will go too, and you might have more questions, and unless you're playing with this, it's not very fun to just be talked to about it. But yeah, so that's a good question. So my students use Dropbox too. So this is a little bit easier to give comments on at the same time. So having 2 people working on a Dropbox file at the same time is actually really scary, as Chris and I found out at a writing retreat where I saved over the top of a bunch of work he had done on a draft we were trying to get published, and I don't think he's forgiven me yet. So like, when you have something open from Dropbox in Word and Chris is working on it, if I open it and save it, I've just lost what he did. That doesn't happen here, so as easily. It doesn't tend to happen here. So that's one reason. I use Dropbox with them to share big readings sometimes, like big PDF type stuff that in our grad class we couldn't get it to work some other way. So that's why I use Dropbox more for personal use so that I'm not, as you probably do too, right? So I'm not lesson planning at home and then get to campus and go, dang it, I left it on my laptop. Now I have it. So yeah, and the other thing that happens with Dropbox, I run a small portion of our writing program called English 30, and all of my leaders use Dropbox to share things. But the other thing that will happen is someone forgets that if they take it out of the Dropbox folder, it's no longer there for anybody. And when I have a lot of students, that scares me. So here it's there, and I can go back in the history, and I don't lose it in the same way that I can with a lot of people on Dropbox. This will be it. They're just going back in and continuing to adjust and fix. And we created a template for ourselves originally that we all followed so that the entries were easier to read, so that we had kind of some conventions, like tell what kind of word it is, give some example. Like we came up with that as a class, what we'd want as part of those entries. So that did some of the whittling right up front. And then as they're hashing that out, in fact, one of the last ones I saw, someone said, after all this debate, someone said, I can't even argue with that anymore. That's smart. Like that was the end of that on that particular entry. So then they'll keep polishing and editing, and that will be it.